Table for Two podcast.
Okay. And then tell me how you came up with that idea.
Table for Two. I really honestly don't remember. It was like I came up with the podcast idea when I was like in a very dark place. For some reason, I always come up with my most wittiest things when I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
dark space. And I was listening. I was in the dark listening to the song. I can't even remember the name of the song. I'm so sorry, but it was like can we please just set a table for two or whatever like that. So I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I just came up with like Table for Two podcast, and then I also knew that I didn't want to like go in my business with nobody. I wanted to be just me. So I figured that I would be doing Table for Two, me and you. Like how we doing right now.
Going back to that, right? Okay, so you came up with the idea for the Table for Two podcast, right? So what was your inspiration of wanting to start a podcast though? Because like, around that time, exactly when that was, when you started it.
When I actually started the podcast was probably what 2020 during the
2020,
pandemic
yeah.
time. Well, I actually used to have like this really big infatuation with Kevin Gates. I always was inspired by Kevin and Drika Gates. I love their
Shout out
relationship.
to them.
Shout out to them. And I used to watch his podcast, him
Mhm.
and Booby Black. I used to watch their podcast all the time while I was at work on my route. I used to sit there and watch their podcast.
Yeah.
And then he used to do these segments where people would call in and he would get them advice.
Mhm.
And it was like really touching to me because I was like, I was always a person that people always come to for advice. Like I'm one that I can give the advice out this world. Can I take it? No. But I could give you some advice out this world. So
Mhm.
I was like, I feel like I could do a podcast. And then everybody was doing, at that time, everybody was trying to start businesses and stuff like that. And people were doing hair, makeup. And I'm not that hair, makeup girl. I'm a tomboy, So
Yeah.
I feel like the podcast was perfect for me because I do have a story to tell, of
Mhm.
course. And I just feel like the podcast was really, really, really like fit for me.
Okay. All right. So what I remember watching the process, right? You started your podcast, you did a couple of episodes, and you stopped, right? Now explain to me like what happened in that process that made you stop, because it was a brief period of time before you kicked back into it.
Well, I stopped because I was, like I said, it's like when I go through my most depressive and dark stages is when I really can like actually think. But during the course of the time that I stopped, I was in a really bad relationship. I'm talking about abusive physically, mentally. I almost felt like I was losing my mind. Like it almost got to the point of like unaliving. I was in a really, really bad relationship. Then I was working at the post office, as you know,
Yeah.
for 9 years, over that probably. And I was in a dark space at the post office. I had lost one of our very close coworkers, Miss Angie.
Yeah.
And people didn't realize, I hate talking about her because I get so emotional. But I was so, so, so sad. Like I used to go to work and be in the bathroom, literally have to go cry right quick. Like,
Yeah.
and then come back out the bathroom, go case around. Like shit was
Yeah.
all good. And shit wasn't good. Like I was so, so hurt behind that because I had a really, really close relationship with her.
Mhm.
I'm not one that had like a relationship with my mom. And she was literally like a mom, a auntie, and a big sister. Like, you ever get that feeling where you know a person love you? These days and age, it's hard to really find like a person that genuinely love you that's not your kid.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
That's true.
So with the relationship with her, it was like I knew she loved me, And it was like for a long time, I didn't feel loved by, I probably would chase men and stuff like that. Even then, I wasn't actually getting love unless it came from like my kids.
Mhm.
So when she died, I was like so depressed about it. Like that was like one of the worst death depressions I had ever had, especially being that she was just calling my phone. I just was at her house and it's like COVID just took her just like that.
Yeah.
We share birthdays and it was just like so, so, so sad for me. So on top of losing her, like I feel like when I first started it, I was in a good space.
Mhm.
And it was doing good when I first started. But then after that, I was going through stuff. I was so unhappy working at the post office, like genuinely just unhappy outside of dealing with that. I felt like I was only there because it was times I would have a conversation with people like, I want to leave the post office. I want to do something. It's like I always felt deep down inside my calling was so much bigger.
Mhm.
But I was in a space where I would just like listen to all the noise around me. So I had my grandma, the family that raised me, they come from lawyers, teachers, everybody got degrees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I listened to them, my uncle, the post office ain't going nowhere, the mail ain't gonna never stop running. That's a good job, keep that, that's a career, you need to stay there. And it was just like, okay, now I'm doing this shit because if I don't work at the post office no more, everybody gonna have the most to say,
Yeah.
So So I'm really fighting in my mind with all that going on, the death of Miss Angie, and then I was in a really bad relationship, like almost like sleeping with, not almost sleeping with the enemy, you know. So it
Mm.
was like the podcast was the least of my worries. I won't know. I couldn't give nobody no advice at that time when I was
Yeah.
going through. It wasn't no advice to be given, baby. Okay, it
Mm.
was the least of my worries, and that's why the podcast kind of like had got on hold. But honestly, I'm so happy that all that happened and the podcast got on hold, because I feel like the new me,
Mm.
like, you know how they say God will take you through things and to show you and open up you. Like, I feel like all that pain gave me so much wisdom and knowledge and understanding, to the point where sometimes it scared me how open like my mind is, how wise I am sometimes. So I'm grateful for that, but I had to stop because
Mm.
I couldn't think. Then I had lost everything. The job, the car, the house, everything. Dealing with that, was on the run from the police about something that this dude had did. It was really bad. He was dealing with females that was like calling DCF saying that I was abusing my children. It was bad. Like, yes,
Oh
it was
snap.
a really bad. So everything had to stop. Everything had to stop, and like God had to create in me a new person. Like,
Mm.
I had to be created a new person so that I could come back like this.
See, I had a conversation with someone, and they was telling me their story, and they was telling me like, a lot of stuff going on. They had an initial plan on what they wanted to do, and just things just start falling apart. And I had to tell them, I'm like, sometimes when your life feel like it's falling apart, it's actually falling into place.